Welcome to Tales Flicks, where we share stories that feel all too real. Before we start today's incredible story of betrayal and vindication, tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing our community connect from all over the globe. Also, as you listen, think about this. Have you ever been through something like this? Share your experience below, because your story matters here. Now let's begin. My name is Liam. I'm 27 years old. If you had told me a decade ago that I would one day inherit my grandfather's entire estate, worth a staggering $3.5 million, I would have laughed right in your face. Back then, I was more concerned with surviving the week than I was with a future filled with lawyers and inheritance. I certainly never imagined I'd be sitting in a polished law office, watching my estranged parents stare at me like vultures circling their next meal. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. These were the same two people who had cut me off the day I turned 18. They threw me out with nothing but a worn-out backpack and the chilling words, "You're not our responsibility anymore." Yet, here they were, popping up at the will reading as if the last 10 years of silence and neglect had never happened. Growing up, my family was a perfectly polished picture with deep cracks just beneath the surface. We lived in a nice house in a quiet suburban town called Maple Creek. My dad was a regional manager for a logistics firm, and my mom was a part-time teacher who acted as if she were the queen of the neighborhood. By all accounts, we were comfortable, but they had one fatal flaw. Appearances were everything. My older sister, Chloe, was their masterpiece, the golden child. She got straight A's, was captain of the cheerleading squad, and never gave them a moment of trouble. In their eyes, she could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was cast as the family's black sheep. I wasn't a rebel, not really. I just didn't fit into the neat little box they had built for me. I preferred art over football, books over cars, and I had a stubborn habit of questioning the things they expected me to simply accept. To them, my curiosity was an act of defiance, and it was unforgivable. The cracks in our family facade began to show when I was a teenager. Money, for them, was never just money. It was a tool, a weapon. For her 17th birthday, Chloe got a brand new convertible. I was told to be grateful for hand-me-downs. Her college tuition was paid in full without a second thought, while I was told that if I wanted an education, I'd better figure out how to pay for it myself. When I tried to argue, to ask why things weren't fair, I was hit with lectures about being a man and earning my place. My mom would sigh, roll her eyes and say, "Liam, you're just too sensitive. You expect the world to hand you things on a silver platter." My dad would just grunt, muttering under his breath about how I'd never amount to anything without them. I'll never forget one dinner. My father leaned across the dining table, his gaze cold and hard, and said, "If you're still living under our roof on your 18th birthday, you're a failure." I forced a laugh because what else could I do? But inside, I felt something shatter. When that day finally came, they didn't just kick me out. They orchestrated it like a theatrical performance. They sat me down in the living room and formally announced they were cutting me off. "It's time for you to learn the value of hard work," my father declared. No money, no support, not even a $20 bill for a hot meal. I walked out of that house with a backpack, 2 changes of clothes, and a part-time job that barely covered gas and groceries. That first night, I slept in the back seat of my beat-up car. Meanwhile, Chloe was posting pictures on Instagram from her sorority house, smiling next to a brand new MacBook, a gift from our parents. The only person in my family who didn't abandon me was my grandfather, Arthur Vance. He was my dad's father, but he was cut from a completely different cloth. Where my parents saw my quiet nature as a weakness, he saw potential. Where they mocked me for being thoughtful, he'd say, "Liam, that's because you think before you speak." He didn't care that I wasn't the star athlete or the golden child. He saw me. He would invite me over on weekends, fill my stomach with a home-cooked meal, and let me crash on his couch whenever I needed a safe place. I never told him the full story of what my parents did, but he was a sharp man. He saw the tension in my shoulders whenever my dad's name came up. He saw how I flinched. Over the years, he became more of a father to me than my own ever was. Fast forward nearly a decade. I had managed to build a modest life. It wasn't glamorous. I worked long hours at a warehouse, saved every penny I could, and kept a safe distance from my family. Chloe would occasionally send me smug text messages showing off her European vacations or her new house, a passive-aggressive reminder that I was still beneath her. From my parents, there was only silence, unless, of course, they needed something. Then, like clockwork, I'd get a call from my mom, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Liam, honey, how are you?" I learned not to fall for it. I kept my answers short and polite. I refused to be their backup plan. And then, the phone call I had been dreading finally came. My grandfather had passed away. The news hollowed me out. Even though he'd been sick, a part of me believed he was invincible. Losing him felt like losing the only real family I'd ever had. When his lawyer called to inform me I was expected at the will reading, I assumed I'd receive something sentimental, maybe his old watch or a letter. I never, in a million years, thought I would be the one inheriting everything. When I walked into that oak-paneled office, I froze. Sitting there, dressed as if they were attending a royal wedding, were my parents and Chloe. My mom's smile was painfully wide. My dad's hand rested on his knee with an air of smug ownership. And Chloe gave me a look that sized me up from head to toe, as if calculating my net worth. I wanted to turn and walk away, but I forced myself into a chair. The air was thick with their cloying, fake sweetness. My mom leaned over and whispered, "Don't you worry, Liam. We'll make sure the estate is taken care of properly." My dad added, "Of course, we'll manage it for you." They were already spending the money in their heads. I could see it in their greedy eyes. They still saw me as that powerless 18-year-old kid they'd kicked to the curb. But then the lawyer, Mr. Davies, cleared his throat, shuffled his papers, and spoke the words that made my heart hammer against my ribs. Per the wishes of the late Mr. Arthur Vance, his entire estate, valued at approximately $3.5 million, is hereby left to his grandson Liam Vance. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. I could almost picture my grandfather, a wry smile on his face, as if he'd been planning this cosmic joke all along. My parents' smiles froze, cracking at the edges. Chloe's jaw literally dropped. Then Mr. Davies turned the page. "There are also," he said, "a few additional stipulations you'll all want to hear, and that's when things took a turn none of us could have ever prepared for." My mother was the first to recover, though her voice was an octave too high, a sugary attempt to mask her rising panic. "Well, of course, that makes perfect sense," she chirped, clapping her hands together softly. "Liam was always so close to Dad, but naturally, Liam will need our guidance. He's so inexperienced with finances. We'll step in to help, won't we, dear?" She looked at my father, who nodded as if this were a foregone conclusion. My father leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Yes, Arthur meant well, I'm sure. But Liam isn't equipped to handle an estate of this size. $3.5 million is a lot for someone with his background. Could ruin him. It's only logical that we manage the funds on his behalf." The way he said ruin him made my stomach clench. They didn't see a son. They saw an obstacle standing between them and a fortune. Chloe smirked, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, already picturing a shopping spree. "Honestly, Liam, don't take this the wrong way, but you've never been, responsible. Remember when you maxed out that tiny credit card in college?" She added with a soft laugh, as if one minor mistake from years ago defined my entire existence. "Dad's right. A sudden windfall could really mess you up. Let us help you." Mr. Davies cleared his throat again, cutting through their pathetic performance. "If I may," he stated, his voice firm. "Mr. Vance specified very clearly that the estate belongs to Liam alone. No trustees, no oversight. Full and total control." His eyes met mine for a brief second, a silent message that said, "Your grandfather knew exactly what they would try." That didn't stop them. My mom placed a hand on my arm, her manicured nails digging slightly into my sleeve. "Liam, sweetheart, we only want what's best for you. We can guide you, make sure you don't make any foolish mistakes. Think of it as a family effort. Grandpa would want us all to benefit." That word, benefit, hung in the air. Benefit for them, not for me. I remained silent, my face a neutral mask. But inside, a volcano of anger was beginning to bubble. All those years of being told I wasn't good enough, of being cast aside for Chloe, of sleeping in my car while they posted vacation photos. And now they had the audacity to think they could swoop in and take control of the one thing my grandfather had left specifically for me. It wasn't even about the money at that moment. It was about their breathtaking arrogance, the baked-in assumption that I was, and always would be, incapable of managing my own life. When the lawyer finally finished, my mom stood up, smoothing her dress. "Well, thank you, Mr. Davies. Liam will discuss the details at home. You'll come over tonight, won't you?" She said it not as a question, but as a command, as if I would automatically fall back into line. My father added, "Yes, we'll get started on a plan. Investments, property, taxes. Don't worry, we'll handle everything." As we walked out, Chloe leaned in close, her voice a venomous whisper. "You're lucky, Liam. If it weren't for us, you'd drown in all this. Don't forget who actually knows what they're doing." I clenched my jaw, my fists tight at my sides. Lucky? No, I was chosen. My grandfather had seen them for who they were and had placed his trust, his legacy, entirely in my hands. And as they walked away, already plotting, I knew this was just the beginning of the fight. The days that followed were a blur of schemes and emotional warfare. The first sign of trouble came when I found a deep, jagged scratch carved along the side of my car, a deliberate act of vandalism. Then, my landlord received a series of anonymous noise complaints about my quiet, one-bedroom apartment. Worse still were the whispers. My parents began a smear campaign in our small town, painting me as a greedy, undeserving grandson who had manipulated an old man and stolen the family inheritance. The cashier at the grocery store would give me a funny look. Old family friends suddenly crossed the street to avoid me. I was isolated, just as they had always wanted me to be. I hit rock bottom one night, sitting alone in my kitchen, staring at a stack of bills. Not because I couldn't pay them, but because I was terrified. Maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't strong enough for this. The old voice of doubt, the one they had planted in my head years ago, began to scream. But then I found it. Tucked away in a drawer was an old envelope from my grandfather. Inside was a letter he'd given me for my 21st birthday. His firm, steady handwriting filled the page. "Liam," it read, "if you're reading this, I hope you've learned by now that the world doesn't give you anything it tries to take. Don't let them. You are stronger than you know. When the time comes to prove it, don't shrink back. Stand tall. They can only take from you if you hand it to them." Reading those words felt like a jolt of electricity. My grandfather had known. He had prepared me for this. That night, something inside me hardened. I was done being a victim. I began to plan quietly and carefully. I documented every threat, saved every manipulative text message, and started researching estate law. I was no longer just surviving. I was preparing for battle. My first move was hiring a quiet, meticulous financial advisor named Marcus. He didn't see a lottery winner. He saw a man trying to honor his grandfather's legacy. With his guidance, I made smart, conservative investments and bought a modest, respectable home on the other side of town. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. No one could ever throw me out of it. With newfound confidence, I started taking on more responsibility at work and earned a promotion. Word of my quiet success began to trickle through town, slowly chipping away at the lies my parents had spread. The turning point came when I met a man named Samuel Reed, a retired attorney and one of my grandfather's oldest friends. "Your grandfather was a wise man," Samuel told me over coffee. "He anticipated there might be trouble. He put certain protections in place." Samuel revealed that my grandfather had structured the will with ironclad clauses. Any attempt by my parents to interfere or claim control would result in their complete and total disinheritance. He hadn't just left me money. He had left me a shield. Then Samuel handed me a small, leather-bound notebook. It was my grandfather's journal. Inside, he had detailed every potential move he predicted my parents would make and laid out a precise strategy to counter them. He hadn't just left me a shield. He'd left me a playbook. The final move came faster than I expected. My parents filed a petition with the court, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage the estate and requesting legal guardianship over the assets. They were trying to have me declared incompetent. It was their last desperate and most public attack, and it was their biggest mistake. On the court date, I walked in with Samuel by my side, calm and prepared. My parents' lawyer painted me as an unstable and reckless young man. My parents and Chloe sat behind him, nodding along with solemn faces. Then it was our turn. Samuel stood and, one by one, presented the evidence. The report from the bank of their attempt to access the funds, copies of their manipulative letters, Chloe's condescending texts, and the explicit clauses in the will. The courtroom fell silent. The final blow was the notebook. Samuel read my grandfather's own words aloud. If they attempt to take what is not theirs, it will be proof enough of why I chose Liam. The judge's ruling was swift and final. The petition was denied. The court issued a stern warning to my parents against any further interference. It was over. Their desperate grab for power had not only failed but had publicly exposed their greed for the entire town to see. The fallout was immediate and devastating for them. My mother was ostracized from her social circles. My father was forced into an early retirement, his reputation in tatters. Chloe, the golden child, found her social status evaporated overnight. She ended up moving back into my parents' house, the three of them trapped together in a prison of their own bitterness. My life, meanwhile, began to flourish. I used the estate to fund community projects my grandfather would have loved. I earned respect not because of my wealth, but because of my actions. One evening, I drove by my parents' old house. The place where I had been made to feel so worthless looked tired and worn down, a reflection of the people inside. For years, that house had been a symbol of my failure. But looking at it now, I felt no anger, no sadness, only peace. Their attempts to break me had instead forged me into something stronger. The ultimate revenge wasn't their downfall, but my own quiet, unshakable success. They no longer had any power over me. I rolled down my window, the cool night air washing over me, and whispered the words my grandfather had wanted me to believe all along. I decide what I'm worth. And with that, I put the car in gear and drove away, leaving the past and them behind for good. What an incredible journey of resilience. Now we want to hear from you. What would you have done in Liam's place? Who do you think was wrong here, him or them? Let the debate begin in the comments. Can you relate to this story? Drop a red heart if you've ever had to find your own strength. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories. Your like helps these untold stories reach someone who needs them. Let's build a safe space together. Share this video with a friend who needs to hear they're not alone. Thank you for being a part of the Talesflix community. We'll see you in the next story.